Welcome to the application segment of this message, which is really just called Following Stars, Finding Stables, talking about how we handle the disappointments of how we expected life to turn out, as the Magi did when they were following the star, looking for Jesus, and they end up finding him 2 years later in the humbleness of Bethlehem, the kid from down the road, the dusty little poor 2-year-old. And that can be our life so often. And so we're looking at how do we begin to process that. So 3 simple questions for us today of application. The first one is, how would you describe your 2020 reality? How did you start? How did you finish? Did you have high hopes that, well, we're just going to have the next layer of this inevitability of the train that our society has been on now for a few decades of just growth, incremental growth, things going pretty well. We get a few dips in the road and that, but things predominantly were going well. And then suddenly the house of cards cascades in, and we're going to really pay the price of that financially, I suppose, and politically for a number of years. So what's your word? How would you describe 2020 for you? You might have had a corker, you might have had a blessing wrapped in difficulty, or you may still be just shattered from the whole experience. Define it. Sometimes it's cathartic just to write out in a sentence or two what this year has meant, and it just allows that to almost the emotion of that to metabolize over to the other side of our brain, where we can attach that then to time and to sequence, rather than just having it float there as emotion that can be triggered at any time. Second question is just this: when you experience your stable moments where there's disappointment, where things haven't turned out well, what has it done in you? Have you tended to react and run away and try and find a better answer? Have you shaken your fist at Jesus and said, why didn't you come through like I thought you promised that you would? Are you able to humble yourself and go, look, maybe I got the fine print of this promise wrong, but I'm just going to bow now to Jesus anyway. No matter how this turns out, you are Lord, I am not. And my role here is to just be with you. Emmanuel is God with me. So what's your response in those sorts of moments? Just reflect on that and write a few lines down in your own notes. And if you're doing a group situation, share your responses and how you normally respond to life's disappointments like that. And then finally, what would be your advice to someone in their stable? Just this week around our church, as most weeks, there's just been incredible hardship suffered by a number of people. And so how do you respond to that? Sometimes the standard Christian response can be quite damaging ultimately. It can get us through the moment. We can just say, it's all going to be fine. Jesus is going to come through and he's going to fix that. It's going to get better one day. Reality is, sometimes life is just a stable. It doesn't get any better. And Jesus never promised that it would. If he gives you that promise clearly, then you can hang on to that. But most of the time his promise is, I'll give you everything that you need. I'm God with you in the stable. So what advice would you give? What advice would you give yourself? What advice would you give to someone who comes to you today and just says, 2020 has just been a shocker. I don't know how to process that. What would you say to that? It's a great exercise for us just to be able to work through and stay positive with the reality of what it means to live with Emmanuel, God with us. Does it mean everything's going to be bright and shiny? We know it's not. We've got to understand, what then does it mean to live in that peace and joy? So those 3 questions there are there for you to process and try to come out of them in a positive sense, with a bit of hope for the next 12 months that comes. We're hoping 2021 obviously is going to become a bit better than the one before. But that hope's got to be based on who God is with us, Emmanuel. So how does that work out in your life? So enjoy doing that, and we look forward to seeing you again in person at church. Bye for now.